culture, every evening, we lit a small clay lamp called a diya. Not because the room was dark, but because the flame marked a threshold between the inside home and the sacred space of outside, between the guest who arrives and the God that we see in them. Hello, everyone. My name is Aradhana Varma, and I'm a designer from India. I come from a civilization that has been talking about iconology, symbolism, and culture for more than 5,000 of years. And today I invite you all to look at something that you see and use every day with slightly different eyes. Aditi Devo Bhavaha. This is a saying in my culture which translates to guest is God. In my first year at OCAD, I was taught a course by Professor Herman B.K. Clark. And he said something very interesting to me, which cracked something open. He didn't ask me who I was from, but he said, "Where are you from?" This really resonated with me, and it took me home and reminded me of my childhood, of the oiled braided hair with jasmine garlands and the fragrant sandalwood tikas, and henna, rangoli, bangles, Hindustani classical music playing in the background. I come from a very rich culture. But somewhere along the lines, I saw that the systems that I came from were not the ones that counted, not in classrooms, not in design school, or not on a digital screen anyway. When I taught a course called Doing Human-Centered Research, when I was TAing for it, a student said something very interesting. She said, "I'm way more funny and interesting when I speak in my mother tongue." And when I heard that, I thought, what else do we lose when the systems we're given do not speak our language, not just literally, but visually, symbolically? And I'm not here to talk about the colonization that we already know about. I'm here to talk about the one that's happening right now, silently, in our phones. If you look at your phone screens and the apps that you use, you can see a home icon, a thatched roof. You see a floppy disk, a manila folder, a generic user icon. These weren't neutral choices. They were made in the 1970s and 80s at Xerox PARC by a homogeneous group of Western designers. We copied their symbols everywhere. We globalized their assumptions and called them universal. 5 billion people use interfaces built on a system without asking about their culture. But here's what I find interesting. This is not the first time when a person and the world around them has had a mismatch, which created something spectacular. In 1808, an Italian countess called Ferolina Fantoni was losing her sight, and what seemed to be a small problem was that she was no longer able to write love letters to her lover in private. So her lover, an Italian inventor named Pellegrino Turri, built her a machine with keys and metal arms, which helped her use her fingers to write instead of her eyes. We call it the typewriter, and the keyboards that we use on our phones is a direct descendant of it. And Kat Holmes, in her book Mismatched, called these love stories. Love letters between two people that sparked something very creative, which is causing connections between countless people today. And this is just one example of many. So my question to you all is, if one man's love for a woman could give us the keyboard, the typewriter, what could our love for 5 billion excluded people give us? When I started my research project, I went around looking for what Indian thought said about icons. My research project was titled Decolonizing User Interface Icons in the Indian Context. And I came across a marvelous study by Dr. Pandit Sri Ram Ramanuja called Hindu Iconology. And it said, in Hindu cosmology, a symbol is not a shortcut. It is a meeting place between two realms, the material and the transcendental. Materials naturally arise from nature. In Hindu cosmology, symbols arise from nature because they are not invented, but they're discovered. And by contemplating the outermost symbol, we're able to reach the innermost concept behind it. This text speaks of a natural affinity between name, nam, and roop, form, name and form. And this code of symbology has been transmitted throughout India for thousands of years. Symbols are the esoteric language of the unconscious mind. I read that sentence and I thought, we've built a digital world around symbols which act as functional pointers, shortcuts, replicable. But here's a civilization saying no. A symbol is alive. It speaks to something deeper. And the question for designers is not whose icons. It is to contemplate the very philosophy of what a symbol is and does. This was the outcome of the research where, through participatory co-design sessions, we came up with alternatives of the symbols that we already see, very common ones. Like the history icon, which is represented by a clock, becomes footsteps of our ancestors, showing journeys that they have walked. The send icon becomes Sandesh, which shows either a tir kaman, bow and arrow, or a bird, the old way we used to communicate. The search becomes a diya, which shows khoj, inner searching, inner light. The generic profile icon shows presence, not identity through a physical body, but that through consciousness, through presence, through Atma, and the Vedic concept of soul on a journey. Dr. Professor Jutta Trevenus, who directs the Inclusive Design Research Center here at OCAD, took a class and she said something very profound. She said that if we plot all of human needs on a scatter plot, we do not get a bell curve, we get a human starburst. And 80% of the human population centers in the 20% of the space, and the remaining 20% of the human population spreads outwards in the terrain. For about 2 centuries, design has followed the 80-20 rule. Focus on the center, ignore the difficult 20. It's efficient, it's profitable. Design solutions can be copy-pasted. But Jutta asked, what are we missing when we ignore 80% of this knowledge terrain? And here's what we're missing. We're missing the keyboard, the typewriter, the touch screen, all of those marvelous inventions that came from someone at the edge. Is difference difficult? Difference is not difficult. It is uniqueness. Uniqueness is creativity. And creativity is the only way worth designing a future. I keep coming back to this Indian concept called Lord Shiva's third eye. It is known as the eye of destruction. But destruction of what? Destruction of duality. This eye sees beyond the binary. Our 2 eyes either see up, down, good, bad, east, west, inclusion, exclusion. But this eye invites us to look at things the way they are, to go beyond our perception of good or bad. It says to look beyond the black and white and see something which we do not yet perceive. It is the Vedic wisdom and knowledge to hold the question longer than is comfortable. What if design held this gaze? What if every time we looked at our phones or we tried to create a symbol, and rather than reaching out for the thatched roof home icon and the generic user, we looked at it and said, maybe there's a different way of showing this. I'd like to come back to the beginning, something that I spoke in the beginning, Atiti Devo Bhavaha. It translates to guest is God. And for the longest time, I thought this is about hospitality, about being kind to strangers. But after doing this research, I understand it differently. I see it as a design principle, a principle that says someone who comes from abroad or foreign, someone whose value system, whose cultural system, knowledge, visual system is different than ours, actually carries something sacred. So don't flatten them to fit the visual system that we have, the digital world that we've created. Don't make them an edge case. Treat them as a guest. Look at them with Lord Shiva's third eye. And just remember that in my culture, guest is God. Jutta taught me that design and creativity thrives at the edges, and Herman asked me who I was from. more than 5,000 years of Indian thought told me that a symbol is alive. So the question for all of us, for designers, is, are we willing to listen? I'd like to leave you with this quote, just as a reminder that all of you carry your ancestors, your culture, this knowledge, this wisdom. It's not an edge or a gap case, it's your treasure. And within you, within the seed, which is you, lies the potential of a forest. Dhanyavad.